Welcome back to the IE427 garage, everybody. Well, not wanting to ever turn work down, and that's something I've learned in the construction field for over 30 years. We've got another project in the shop. So Chad here brought his car, which is what we would call a Roller Plus. So it's already got the engine, the transmission mounted in the car, pretty much ready for wiring and first start. And he wants us to go ahead and complete this car for him. So we're in the process right now. He put the body on before trailering this down from Washington. And we want to get this body, the hood, the doors, all pulled off today so we can get it back to a rolling chassis and basically make it easier for us to work on. So stick around and we'll show you what's going on. All right, we're doing pretty good. We've got the doors off and we've got them set aside over here. We've got the trunk deck lid off as well as the hood. And then we've got those set over here. Chad's working on getting the fasteners from underneath the door sills pulled out. And then we'll get the hardware on the front and the hardware on the back. And this body will come off and get stored out in the yard.
Size nut and bolt.
Uh-oh. I hope I remember to get the music turned off for the last clip. I mean, it's not a big deal because the channel isn't monetized anyway, but I'd hate to give that potential money to someone who didn't deserve it. Is that the hardware that came with it?
No.
Oh.
So when the kit was delivered, the nut and bolt was completely stripped, and I basically just had to cut them off.
Oh, okay.
I think you can still see some of the, I can't remember what it was, but some burn marks.
Yeah. Covered. Good body work. Fine. We're gonna have to cut those off too. One wire alternator?
Yep. Oh, I zip-tied the wires. I got the bracket in there.
See how you are?
Do you have some scissors? I gotta cut zip tie.
Oh, the bracket can stay on. You just need to get it away from the body. So it just all you need out for these right there.
Oh, but the
bracket itself can stay. The body will come off. The body was forward.
okay.
So chassis. is what we get.
No, he just wants to cut the zip tie.
I know, I understand. I'm gonna get him a pair of cutters. Hey, hey, no.
Oh, but we are. Listen to the words that are coming out of his mouth. I just want to cut the zip tie. Let the guy cut the zip tie.
You know, I can send you back to the house.
Here, well. What, to make a sandwich?
Yeah, go make me a sandwich. What size is the bolt head?
These are 5/16.
Oh, there.
Don't you have a drill?
Right here. More fun to watch him struggle. Wrench?
Yeah. So you just, oh, I guess the other one's over here.
I'll save them if you want, but I generally just throw them in the trash. Okay, it's been a couple of days, and Chad has made it home safely, and he's already been texting me for some ideas to have the car wrapped versus painting. But we'll see, because I've already started telling him that you still have to do all the body work, and you have to get it primed, or sometimes the person that's wrapping it requires it to be painted so that the wrap actually adheres. But anyways, I wanted to quickly go through Chad's car, because it is the farthest along project that's here. Now, the order in which the cars get done is kind of a roll of the dice, because I'm going to get to certain parts of each of these projects as they progress through the shop, whether I'm waiting on parts or whether I'm waiting on answers from each of the car owners. So this is just normal. So one of the reasons we like to have more than one project in the shop at a time is that if something happens and we run into a roadblock, we can just quickly move over to the other project and not lose time here in the shop. So on Chad's car, we had a day, basically. He spent, he arrived on a Friday night. We unloaded the car, got everything in the shop, and then he stayed with us overnight. And then Saturday, we had a good part of the morning to kind of go over what he wants done on the car, where he's at on the car, and then some of the things that I mentioned to him that we might want to change. Not because they were done wrong, but just because I think it's going to offer more functionality to the car. And so let's start at the back of the car, because I think this is the biggest issue right now. Chad wanted the 15-inch wheels and tires. Now, I haven't physically pulled the wheel off yet, but I think what may have happened here is the person that sold him these wheels, who I happen to know, may have cared less about the wheels and tires actually fitting the car than making the sale. We have major interference between the brake calipers and the wheels themselves, and we also have interference with the lower driver's side track lock bracket. So I'm going to see what I can do to kind of finesse that lower track lock bracket, which is right about there. It's hard to see with the light. But so we can get these wheels to move in. Because right now, Chad's got some spacers on there. I don't know if he said there were inch or inch and a quarter, maybe even inch and a half spacers. But the tires are out past the edge of the fender, and that's not going to work. Over time, it's just not going to work as the car settles in. And really, to get a good look on the car, you don't want this thing so high in the back just so it doesn't hit the fenders. So we've got to figure something out. The brakes I can deal with, because if nothing else, I can change these out to smaller diameter rotors, and then I can put the Ford, I think they're the Varga, calipers on the back. I have all that stuff upstairs. So we can deal with the brakes. I'm not worried about the brakes. I'm really worried about that track lock bracket on the bottom here. Now on the passenger side, it doesn't seem as though that bracket's going to be an issue. And I don't know why it would be on one side versus the other, because the Panhard bar connects on the passenger side, and it looks like it'll clear. So I'm going to take a look at that. I'm going to see if there's anything we can do to move or kind of shave that track lock bracket so that wheel will tuck in. And then, like I said, we can deal with the brakes. The other issue that Chad hit me up about is he saw our drop trunk mod. And even though he's already got all these panels riveted in, we're probably going to do a drop trunk box in this because, you know, for all you guys out there, it adds so much room to your trunk. You know, with the Mark IV change on the back of the body versus the Mark III and before, the back came down, but the chassis stayed in the same spot. So you lost almost 2 inches of vertical height in the trunk below that 3/4 inch hoop here in the back. And so that's a lot of real estate to lose in a trunk, especially if you want to take this thing for a long weekend with your wife or your girlfriend. There's just not enough room to put 2 overnight bags in here along with everything else that you're going to have to take on a weekend trip. So we're gonna probably do that. The tank doesn't have any fuel in it, so it'll be an easy thing to drop the tank, get that box put in, get the aluminum cut out, and I think we've talked him into carpeting at least the floor of the trunk and putting some heat and sound mat in there as well, just to eliminate any of the tin canning that happens when you have those aluminum panels and they're not covered. Now, as we walk through the rest of the car, there were just other little things that I told him that I thought we should change. For instance, he put the inertia switch in exactly the spot, which is right here, that red cap, as it shows in the assembly manual. But the problem is the wires hang down, and you see that below the dash. So I like to get it out of the way, and recently, rather than trying to tuck it up in behind the driver's side of the dash, we've moved it over to this side, the passenger side, in the firewall extension. So we basically just mount it to the firewall extension piece on the passenger side and lengthen the wires for them to reach. And it works just fine over there. And if you ever have a problem where it cuts off, in this case, there's no electric fuel pump, so we're probably going to wire this into the ignition, so it cuts ignition for him. If it ever does that, then you can easily push the button. There's easy access underneath the dash to get up there, push the button, and reset it. The other thing that we talked to him about was getting rid of all of the Speed Hut gauge like wiring. rather than running these separate, we're going to tie them into the Ron Francis harness like kind of they were designed to do. Now, I know there are guys out there that will argue with me. If you call Speed Hut gauges, they're going to tell you you need to use their wires too. But there's no difference other than the fact that you're not going to end up with a second loom or possibly even a third loom of wires underneath your hood. And on a carbureted car where you're trying to eliminate all the wire clutter under the dash, it just makes sense to consolidate this all in one loom and be done with it. So we're going to do that. We do have to fine-tune his throttle linkage, but right now there is a spacer, a solid spacer underneath the carburetor that it was shipped with, so I have to remember to pull the spacer out, put the carburetor back on. But when we do that, then we've got a new issue because the carb is going to be sitting so low that his Cobra oval air cleaner is going to be sitting right on top of the distributor. So we're going to end up with some type of spacer there in order to make all that work. So as you guys can see, as you add one thing to the car, it kind of changes, other things. And so you got to kind of always look one or two steps beyond what you're working on at the time so that you don't get yourself boxed into a corner. Also, the battery that he's got installed in here is a year and a half old, and it hasn't been on a charger. So I've had it on the charger here since he left, and it doesn't appear to be taking a charger. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that out to my my high amp charger, see if we can give that thing a quick boost, and hope it will start to charge. I'm going to, before I do that, I'm going to take the holder off the top of the battery hold down, and I'm going to pop the caps, and yes, there are caps underneath the maintenance-free battery, and I'm going to check the water level just to make sure the water level's good before I put a big charge on it. Up till now, I just had the low amp battery tender on there, and it didn't want to charge. I mean, the red light stayed on now for 2 days, and normally it'll bring a near dead battery back in that amount of time. So I want to make sure that before I take this thing and toss it, that we've done everything we can in order to save it. So that's one thing on the list. Over here, I talked to him about the horns, and I think what we're going to do is we're going to replace the horns that he has and the location. So we're going to move them from where they are here, and we're going to put them on the frame member, probably below the steering rack, facing forward, and we're going to get one of our bad boy horns installed in there, because that sounds like a 1990s Crown Victoria, and the bad boy horns sound more like a proper English sports car horn. So we're going to do that. The last thing that I have over on this side of the car is the clutch cable. Now I'm going to give you all this warning, and I'm not throwing Mike Forte under the bus, because a lot of times Mike doesn't know what you're ordering or what you're ordering the parts for. So he's just trying to satisfy your wants and needs for whatever project you're working on. But in a Factory 5 Roadster, a Mark IV, a Mark III or before, you cannot use a firewall adjuster with an adjustable cable. You basically run out of adjustment. So this is all the way out right now. Down at the transmission, we're at the end of the threads on the adjuster down at the clutch fork. So there's no adjustment left. It's one or the other. You use either the adjustable cable or you use the firewall adjuster with a standard cable. You can't use both. It just doesn't work. So there's a tip for you guys. We are going to put one of our turn signal switches on this. I already talked to Chad about that. That was one of the things he wanted. I think we're going to upgrade to the high velocity Ford style fan. And here's my reasoning. And it's usually dependent on climate, right? So we sent a Coyote car up to Washington. Now Chad lives in Washington. But the Coyote car, that was Pauline, that car's living on the coast. It doesn't get hot. You know, the temperatures are always mild there. So we didn't have to worry about that fan, that small spall fan that Factory 5 provides, and the fan shroud from Breeze. We didn't have to rely on that keeping that engine cool on the hottest day. Chad lives in Washington, but he lives inland. And so his temperatures are more like the temperatures we get here in the Inland Empire. So they can be really mild in the wintertime. You know, here we're lucky if, you know, it gets down to freezing during the winter at night. But during the summer, we can see temperatures in the hundreds, 110s, 115s. It all just depends on whether we have a Santa Ana flow or we don't, or we have a coastal flow as far as the wind. So we're going to upgrade this fan, and we're going to put a 50 amp relay in for the fan, so that on the hottest day, he's not going to be looking for any more cooling for the pushrod V8 that he's got in the car. And that's one thing I didn't note on the video thus far. This is a Blueprint short block that he picked up from Mike Forte that Mike went ahead and dressed out. So it has the Blueprint heads on it. It looks like a Edelbrock Performer RPM intake manifold. I think that's a Holley 4-barrel, but I think it's a... That looks... Is that a vacuum? It might be a vacuum secondary, which probably isn't the best choice, but we'll work around that if we have to. And so this is a really nice package that Mike put together for him, and it even has Mike's drive accessories on it. So it has his billet aluminum bracket for the alternator and a self-adjusting tensioner down there. So you never have to worry about the belt stretch or anything like that. The tensioner is going to take care of all of the adjustment on the belt, so it's never going to slip. And I really like that. We've used that a couple of times on other cars, and it really works out nice. And it looks nice and clean. So we're going to take care of that. We're going to change some stuff that Chad did, but not to any great extent. We're going to take off the transmission tunnel, and we're going to do one of ours across the top of the transmission tunnel just to get everything all cleaned up and allow us to install a padded cover with vinyl on it or leather. Either one, it's Chad's choice, but I think we'll probably go with vinyl. It just seems to hold up better long term. And then one thing I noticed when I was walking around the car yesterday is that it looks like when they were building this, because Chad did this with his kids, it looks like they trimmed this panel right here. Now, don't trim this panel, guys. That acts as part of the support system for the body when it goes on. And we still need to put bulb seal on there when the body goes on for the initial fitment for body work. And then at the end, when it gets the finished painted body on it. And right now, there's no room for bulb seal in some of those spots. So it has been trimmed. We'll most likely replace that with a new panel. We'll either paint or powder coat it to make it look the same. We might even just paint it black because you really can't see any of that from the engine side. But yeah, don't trim that. If you're going to trim anything on that panel, I'll give you this little tip. You're going to want to make the notch right here where the windshield goes deeper by about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch, and that'll allow you to get your windshield in there much easier when you go to fit the windshield. The cooling system. Other than the cooling fan, the only thing we're going to change in the cooling system, this is not going to run a heater, is we're going to get rid of this corrugated tubing. So I'll show you this when we do it, but you can get this hose from point A to point B at the radiator by using a Fox Mustang upper radiator hose. And you have to cut it in 2 pieces. So one piece will be this 90 right here, and then the other piece will be a step down over here. Now I'm going to hit Chad up and ask if he wants a metal, so stainless steel or aluminum tube, kind of in the middle of that. I prefer to just run it rubber all the way because it's, fewer connections. And so with every connections you make in a cooling system, in a wiring system, you're adding points of failure. And so if you limit those points of failure, you're less apt to have failures because you have less failure points. So I prefer the rubber hose, but I'm going to give him that option because he's already got the lower hose from Breeze. So that's that nice stainless or brushed aluminum. I think that's stainless tubing for the bottom hose. And so if he wants it to match, I can make him one for the top, but it's going to be just a section, probably a 6-inch section of the stainless tubing. And then, of course, that'll add 2 more connections. And so it'll be very much like what he has. It'll just function better because that corrugated hose just sucks. For lack of a better word, it just sucks. One other thing he pointed out that he wasn't happy with was the brake lines right here. He was instructed to put the tabs facing down so that the brake line, the hard brake line, would come in from the top and run the soft lines out directly out the bottom. We don't mount them that way. We generally put the tabs up and down vertically, and we run the hard brake line into the back. That brings the soft brake line basically parallel with the control arm right here, and it keeps it up out of the way. So what Chad is having a problem with when he moves this thing right now is if you steer this thing to lock, it's rubbing the soft brake line. And over time, it's going to just start tearing apart that outer covering, or if it doesn't give, the rubber of the tire will. So either way, not a good way to have those things in there. So we're going to address that. We'll probably put some AN390s right here. Again, I don't like adding fittings because it adds to points of failure. But in this case, that's the easiest fix for the problem with the soft brake lines rubbing against the tires. We're also going to pull the headers off, as much as I dread the driver's side. Actually, the 302 based engine isn't too bad. With the new design on the footbox for the Mark IV, it's not terrible. But Chad was instructed by the company that made his headers to use the copper RTV for the seal between the headers and the head surface. And he's concerned that when he was fitting them up, that he smeared the RTV off enough that the engine is probably going to leak at those header gasket points. So we're probably going to take the headers off, we're going to scrape off all the residue from the RTV, and we're going to go with some soft aluminum gaskets, and we're probably going to go ahead and upgrade to locking hardware so that he never has to worry about any of the bolts backing up. And then the last thing over here really isn't going to apply to you complete kit type of builders. Chad ordered his kit as a base kit. And so any of the stuff that wasn't included in the base kit, he purchased separately. So for instance, he bought all of his fuel tank liner, fuel tank straps, all from Breeze Automotive, along with the filler tube. Well, when he was supplied all that stuff, it didn't come with a strap. So basically, the OEM Ford piece is a bracket that goes right around here, and basically it kind of holds the tank filler in where there's a ridge on the tube. And so he didn't get that. And then he was told that, oh, you really don't need it. Well, I think, for the cost or expense of a retaining bracket, it's well worth it. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to order one up, we're going to put one on, and then he's got the big, I guess it's a big bore vent tube. So it looks like he just went through the Breeze catalog and ordered one of everything. And he's got it over here on this side of the car. And I think we're going to relocate that, and we're going to direct that into a charcoal canister, because in my discussions with him when he was here, I told him that if he ever parks this in his garage, that he's going to get some gas smell. And he said, well, that's probably where he's going to park the car once it's finished, rather than out in their barn where they were building the car before they shipped it down here. So we really want to eliminate those fuel smells in his garage. So we're probably going to take that into a stock style Ford charcoal canister, and then when we start, using this thing, or we get fuel in it, one, it won't stink up my shop, and two, when he gets it and takes delivery of the car, it won't stink up his shop. And so I think that's kind of a wrap on Chad's car. All right, so that's going to do it for this one. I think in the next video, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do kind of the same type of rundown for the coupe. If you're enjoying the content here, please do the like, the share, the subscribe, all that kind of stuff. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.